Right, so the BBC, they've come in for some heavy criticism for their coverage of events in Gaza, their choice of language in relation to Israel versus that of Gaza, and you know the sort of thing I mean here. Israelis getting killed whereas Gazans have died. Gazans getting evacuated instead of displaced or forcibly transferred. Israel is defending itself rather than committing genocide. We know the way these things get presented, and we also know many media outlets have been rinsed by the public who are more aware now of this situation in the Middle East, to an extent better than ever before. And that's mainly thanks to alternative and independent media utilising social media, as well as utilising foreign media too, to unspin the narratives being set by mainstream sources in the UK and expose what they could and should be saying if it wasn't for the fact they want to present a narrative rather than just report the events as they are happening. Actually just report the news. Well, with the ceasefire now over, we're back to business as usual at the BBC, but with their narratives, their headlines not having changed, still making these mistakes, still offending so many people that Israel is being treated differently, more positively than Palestine is. People are more angrily calling out what they see as an absolute disgrace now. And two headlines over the last few days in particular have encouraged more disdain and disgust from the British public than I'd previously taken notice of. Right, so BBC headlines, much like a lot of our mainstream media, have come in for criticism in how they are presenting events, and it's the choice of language that causes the most offence, not only because of how they are choosing to present the news with a blatant underlying bias in the way they do so, but it's dishonest as well. Let's start with this one here. We're in the wake of Israel beginning to pound Gaza once again on Friday morning, beginning at 5 a.m. our time as they did. Later that day, the BBC ran the headline, Hamas-run health ministry says 178 killed in Gaza as fighting resumes. For a change, they've used the words killed, but they haven't explicitly said 178 Gazans killed there. The bigger problem with this headline, though, is that they felt the need to say Hamas-run health ministry. By doing that, they've implied that the health ministry, being Hamas-run, with Hamas being widely regarded, mostly regarded by people in this country as a terrorist group, as far as this country is concerned, if they are the ones reporting the casualties, well, why should we believe the words of terrorists on this? Of course, they'll say a big number. Why should we believe it, though? They're terrorists. It offers a narrative that this is something we should all just take with a pinch of salt. Yet the BBC still ran the story, so if that is what they want us to think, well, why bother report it at all? Well, of course, they'd be accused of a lack of due impartiality if they didn't cover casualty rates on both sides. But while they'll quite credibly say something like Israeli health ministry when it comes to Israel, giving the implication that this is the government speaking and therefore we should believe what you'd expect to be true and accurate numbers coming from the government, the same cannot be said of those numbers in Gaza. The problem here is that all health ministries, no matter what the country or what the territory, are a government body to some extent or other. By saying Hamas health ministry even, the BBC are not so subtly offering a message that this might be something to doubt, despite them reporting it. But actually Hamas are the government in Gaza right now. They are elected to government. It would have killed the BBC to just say Gaza-run health ministry in the same way they would say Israeli-run health ministry, and give it the same level of credibility to most casual observers, stick in the news almost they have their tea after work or whatever, because they don't want them to think government-run. They want them to think terrorist-run instead. That's the narrative they're setting. But equally, they can claim to be reporting the news accurately because Hamas are the government in Gaza, not that they report that at the same time. Every ministry in every governed area is a political entity run by a political force. People don't think of Hamas that way here, yet this is what they are in Gaza. Why can they not say equally instead of the Israeli health ministry, they could say instead the occupiers' health ministry? That's the flip side of the coin, isn't it? Seems only fair, doesn't it? The only reason the BBC and other media outlets do this is to delegitimise the reported deaths in Gaza, which are so much greater than Israeli deaths have been. It is silly, but it is all part of the narrative. We might perhaps prefer to think of the BBC as the government-run BBC, for clarity perhaps. You could flip that on its head as well. You could use our own country as an example here, I guess, as well. How about those waiting lists for the NHS, folks? Backlog getting bigger thanks to the Tory-run health service being underfunded. Tory-run health service. We could hammer that point home plenty, couldn't we? Our media doesn't, though. Or perhaps more accurately, the being privatised Tory-run health service. That becomes a bit of a mouthful then, though. Might have trouble fitting that all onto the front of a tabloid front cover. Doesn't happen, does it? The other headline that has had people incensed, though, has been the story of a Londoner and her family in Gaza, which prompted the BBC headline, Londoner loses 42 family members. Well, where did she lose them then? Down the back of the sofa? Under the sideboard? Perhaps she should have one of those alarms put on them where if you whistle, they whistle back at you. She didn't lose them, BBC. They were blown up. A bomb strike on the house of this woman's sister killed 42 of her family, leaving just 4 survivors. And the only reason the BBC covered this story is because she wants to bring the survivors back here to the UK. The bigger story should be, why did Israel target their house? They were in central Gaza, as it happens. They weren't in the north, where they'd been made to evacuate, or have been forcibly displaced, to be more accurate. They were apparently amongst the first to leave the north, which is why so many people were in one house. And this is happening across Gaza because the place is so densely populated, and now that massive population is having to cram itself into effectively half as many houses. But I suppose it just made them all easier to wipe out with one bomb. Which one was the Hamas operative in this family then? Well, that question wasn't asked. Why did Israel target the house at all then? Well, that question wasn't asked either. All this story from the BBC is about is this woman trying to get legal help to rescue what is left of her family. I'm amazed they didn't just get a Tory minister to chip in about stopping the boats and make it into a full-blown asylum seeker story. That'll come in due course, I suppose, if Israel succeed in displacing all of the people of Gaza. I'd love to know how the person who dreamt up that headline sleeps at night. Lost family members when they were actually murdered by occupying forces. Evolved Politics got in on this story, rewriting the headline for the BBC in the name of accuracy. I thought it rather generous of them, and it actually is a very good headline. They changed it to Israel murders 42 members of British Palestinian woman's family in single horrifying Gaza bombing raid. It really is of no wonder trust in the BBC is at such an epic low, and here they are causing more offence with their narratives. It angers me. You can tell now. You can hear it in my voice. I'm not very good at hiding it. It fails those most grievously affected. And for what? Cap-doffing servility to those calling the shots. Tory-run BBC indeed. If you're watching this, you already are embracing alternative media. So support your favourites, whoever they are, if you can, because without these smaller independent outlets, these voices, you're left with the BBC and their ilk. And who wants to just go back to having them? Thanks for watching. I hope you found the video useful. Please like, share and subscribe if you did. More content out daily. Please do have your say on this story in the comments below and be part of the conversation. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation where even BBC subtitled translations cannot be trusted anymore. Thanks to an eagle-eyed translator and a translation non-profit organisation gave the BBC an absolute beasting over their blatantly pro-Israel apparent translation of a hostage released by Israel. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.